Let me continue to pursue that line of questioning in a minute. Let me go to Dr. Fandy for a question as well. Dr. Fandy, a former CIA agent by the name of Robert Baer writes in the May Atlantic Monthly issue that particularly he's concerned about Saudi Arabia's support for fundamentalism and for terrorism abroad. He states in this article many things, but one of them he claims that the Saudis have transferred $500 million to al-Qaeda over the past decade. Now, do you think that there is any kind of credibility to a figure like that? How would you be able to track that, and how would you measure the Saudi support with the United States for fighting terrorism prior to 9/11?
To just be absolutely honest, I just don't know this figure. I did not come across this figure. And also the idea of wire transfer or transfer of funds, I can probably say throughout the Arab world, people use cash and not banking systems. So it's very difficult to actually trace it unless the origin of the money came from a Western country, unless there is something that's really, the idea that I haven't seen from my study of Saudi Arabia that people use checks or even when they use bank deposit. This is not really a large group of the society. Most people get their salaries in cash. So the idea of wire transfers with that amount of money has to originate somewhere else. It could have connection to Saudi Arabia.
I think he insinuates, as Dr. Gudaratna did, with respect to Mohammed Jamal Khalifa, that some of the money was funneled through charities and other things.
That's right. I think that's the very central question for really looking at Saudi Arabia, is to look at these charities. And I talk to Saudis about this in interviews in terms of what do they think of that. And I think sometimes they come off as these are the unintended consequences of bad politics, that somehow they decided to upgrade Saudi Arabia's image in the Muslim world, therefore they tried to help the poor with schools, with other places, not knowing that the ideology as well as the manning of these organizations was hijacked by al-Qaeda members. So there is, I have no way of assessing whether this is an honest claim or a dishonest claim, but I would say that probably, given what I know about Saudi Arabia, that this is probably the unintended consequences of bad policy and lack of foresight and long-term planning. You see mosques and other things being supported by Saudi Arabia, even in the United States. But Saudi students use them for 4 years until when they are here, and then they are taken over by other people. So there is no follow-up for these organizations. Well, money from Saudi Arabia went to various groups of the Mujahideen. There was certain cultural support that this is a good thing to fight the Soviet Union. Also, money went to organizations that were fighting in Europe, in Bosnia, to support their Muslim brothers and their co-religionists, if you will, who are embattled in Europe. Yes, a lot of money went into that, but how it's being used and who used it, it is very difficult to actually say that certain money was authorized by, let's say, officials or something of that sort. But certainly there was a sentiment in Saudi Arabia that at the time was encouraging people to support these charities. Now, I think this is a very important issue to think about as we think about probably phase 2 in the war on terrorism, really sort of drying up these resources, or drying up the swamps, if you will. We are looking at really educational institutions and charities. We are looking at really the software of the Muslim world, if you will. I mean, the hardware and the money and everything else can be looked at very carefully, but the software, the educations, what is in the Muslim world's head, how people are being raised and educated and other things, this is our task, and that requires investigating very carefully educational institutions, investigating very carefully charities, investigating very carefully textbooks, and whatever goes into that bad software, we have to rewrite that software, if you will. And if we don't rewrite it, nobody else will rewrite it.